Welcome to Inside Bremerton. This is the City of Bremerton's video newsletter, focusing on issues and topics important to its citizens. We are at the Norm Dix Government Center, but we're going to go across the street to Rice Fergus Miller Architects. Rice Fergus Miller has redeveloped and redesigned the old Sears Automotive Center on 5th Street. Let's go across the street to 275 5th Street and talk to Steve Rice, Dave Fergus, and Mike Miller. We're inside the Rice Fergus Miller offices, and we are at 275 5th Street. Joining me, Steve Rice, Dave Fergus, Mike Miller. Welcome to our program.
Yeah, welcome to Rice Fergus Miller.
This is just an awesome, awesome building. Literally took my breath away when I walked in. It's like, oh my gosh, am I really in Bremerton? It's just, it's fabulous. Congratulations to all of you and your fabulous staff. Steve, I want to start with you. Give us the history of Rice Fergus Miller.
Sure. Well, I began living here in the early 80s when I was married and commuting over to a job in Seattle, and I'd always wanted to have my own practice. In 1987, the opportunity came, and I took it. I left a firm where Dave and I had met and started a practice here in downtown Bremerton. It was September of '87. And I rented the little 200 square foot penthouse office on top of the 245 building, and what a great place to start. I could see out over all the town, and the question, of course, was, can a practice thrive here? And I'd done a little bit of poking and probing around with some people I knew in Bremerton, and the feeling was that if someone showed up and did a really good job, that the community would support them. And I felt that the strength of our experience in Seattle really was about client service. I knew how to offer service and thought that if I could do that here, that we'd be okay. So Dave and I had a deal, and our deal was that I would come over and start the practice, and when I had more work than I could do myself, that he would join me and buy half of whatever I'd accumulated at that point, which he did in 1990. So the first 3 years were just getting established and trying to meet as many people as possible, offering service. Most of our work at that time was either little remodel projects in downtown or single-family residences, and we did a lot of those. Probably 4 or 5 remodels for every new house. But the practice grew in 90. I got some work on a new church and with the CK school district, and so I called Dave and said, this is the time.
Mm-hmm. And I need you. Come on.
And he and Mary Beth had just built a house in Bellevue. They sold it and moved over here to Silverdale, and we started growing the practice, and we started hiring people. We had, 12 years of really consistent growth, and near the end of that time, around 1999 or 2000, Mike and his wife Babs moved their family from Magnolia Hill to Bremerton. Mike had been working at a very large firm in Seattle doing way different kind of work than we were doing, and wanted a little different environment for his kids, and we started talking about expanding the partnership that way. 2 years later, after some commuting and some ferry faux pas, Mike decided, I've got an entrepreneurial itch, I want to scratch it. This all makes sense, it all lines up. He brought 2 new markets to us, and really under Mike's tutelage and Dave's expanded fire service work, the firm more than doubled in size. And I kind of thought when I started that if we could have a firm of 6 or 8, by the time I retired, I'd be completely satisfied. And I think I probably would be, but we've been as big as 41, we're 38 right now, I think, and the growth has added so many new dimensions to practice beyond what I ever could have imagined. We are a very professional practice. We offer very professional service, but I never dreamed of the capabilities that we would be able to bring to the table. And certainly the whole sustainability world, and really this is a capper for us with this building, is it's been just a wonderful ride, almost 24 years now. So.
Dave, when you joined the firm and after a few years, the expansion went outside of Kitsap. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, when I joined Steve in 1990, there was just essentially the two of us, and we had, very few employees. At that time, we looked and worked to get every single project in Kitsap County we could possibly find. And it was everything from things to the school district to small retail things in the mall to houses to everything else. And I think it was about the mid-90s that a fire station project came up for what was then known as Kitsap County Fire District Number 1. It's now Central Kitsap Fire and Rescue. And it was a fire station out on the Seebeck Highway. And for whatever reason, that just really hit my hot button. And I went after that project with a vengeance. It was my own fire district. I was just really excited about that particular one. And coincidentally, it was the interview that everything went wrong on. It was just, it was unbelievable, the coincidences that just happened to happen on that particular one. But I won the job anyway. That was the start of our fire service work and a significant practice that we have now. We did very well on that project. It led to doing another fire station for a neighboring district, and then with that, with yet another neighboring district. It was all essentially on the Kitsap Peninsula here. And I think it was the late 90s, maybe around 2000, that we actually landed a project on the other side of the Sound. And so that was a project for the Renton Fire Department. Shortly after that, we won two very nice station projects for what's called Central Pierce Fire and Rescue. They're the largest fire district in Pierce County. And those really catapulted our fire service work and really gave us a regional name. Since then, I've become a regular speaker at national and international conferences talking about fire station design and planning and kind of rubbing shoulders with fire chiefs from across the country. It's been interesting. We've done that not so much to do work across the country, but it's interesting being sort of on the cutting edge of what's happening in other places. Mm-hmm. And that way we become very proactive in what we bring our clients back here home. We bring this national experience and national trends right here home. And so I think that makes our work much better, and that's partly what we're known for.
Congratulations on that. Mike Miller joined the firm and brought a whole nother expertise area and another expansion to the firm. Tell us what you're specializing in.
Well, I joined the firm in 2002, April 1st. They say April 8th, but it was really April 1st, and I took the first week off. I grew up architecturally at MBBJ in Seattle, which is a wonderful firm and one that's nationally and internationally known for a lot of things, but I was there doing healthcare work. And at a certain point in my career there, I was asked to look into retirement housing. There was a discussion about demographics and the aging of our population, and a sense that there was a market there, and it was something I'd expressed an interest in. So my expertise at MBBJ was pretty focused, healthcare and master planning and design and development of major medical systems, as well as retirement living at all levels, skilled nursing, dementia, assisted living, and independent living. Steve mentioned that I had moved over here in 1999 with my family. We did that for lifestyle reasons, with really not an intention of leaving the firm I was with. But a couple of things happened. Primarily the earthquake that happened in 2001 caused me to rethink that I should live closer to where I work. And the ferries were down because of the earthquake, and so one thing led to another. Steve and I went to college together at the University of Washington, and had conversations early on during that college years about the potential of working together. And when I moved over here, that potential developed, obviously, because of proximity. So my work is in healthcare, primarily with Harrison Medical Center. We do a lot of work for Harrison, and we're proud of that work. Harrison's a wonderful medical center. We're involved with Harrison, both doing work at Silverdale and here in Bremerton, as well as master planning, and we also do outlying work. We work for a lot of the medical providers in Kitsap County. Physician groups like the Doctors Clinic and West Sound Orthopedics and other developers of medical office space. So we have a pretty diverse medical practice, and I'm proud to say that we have probably an exceedingly experienced group of architects working in our medical design field as well. Relative to senior housing, we have a large practice in senior housing. We keep quite a few people in the office busy with that. And that practice, like Dave's practice in fire stations, does expand way beyond Kitsap County, as far away as just the outskirts of Minneapolis, where we're doing a project that's right around 1 million square feet in size. The projects we do in the greater Seattle area are primarily for not-for-profit senior housing providers. Some in downtown Seattle, some in Redmond, Issaquah, here in Kitsap County with Martha and Mary and others. So it's a local but a regional practice.
And
Char, a couple of things, before we turn to the building, that when I hear this, and I'm kind of amazed at what Mike and Dave have done, it's also important to realize that one of the real focus points for the practice is to remain a community practice in many ways. So while I've seen Dave and Mike, do wonderful things here and farther afield in their respective market areas, there's a group of 6 of us who maintain really what's a community practice, a very true community practice. And it's always been a tenet of mine that if the firm grows and as it expands and brings these other capabilities and we start, generating income from other jurisdictions and bringing it home, that we not forget that we were a community practice first. And it's really important to me, and I think to us, that we always have the capability to serve local clients with their needs, whether it's one of these or one of those, whether it's a large need or a small need, that we keep the capability of being responsive to those who helped us get established and grow. And it's just super important that we not forget that we're a community practice as well. So I think it's a great blend of things that we have going on. And
totally awesome.
Yeah, and if I could just tag on to that, Dave mentioned a national experience level, and that's really important in what we do, and our ability to bring that back to our local clients is extremely important, as Steve says. So, for instance, we're helping Rick and Leslie Krieger with an expansion of their properties up in Silverdale, just north of Silverdale, and part of the reason we're able to help them is because of our experience level in national and regional retirement housing and skilled nursing. So it all comes back, and we talk about community relative to our practice, but we also act for the community, and we do a lot of community service, whether it's being on boards or raising funds or whatever. We see this practice as being a Kitsap County-based practice, and that's really why we haven't moved someplace else.
Well, that's the next topic.
yeah,
why we didn't. Thank you. What a perfect segue. So Steve Rice Architects started on 4th Street in the penthouse, 200 square feet.
Right.
Then you moved across the street.
Right.
Well, we actually took a step down a floor.
Oh, you did? Okay, talk about that. You went
Well,
downstairs.
Well, when I joined Steve, as he had mentioned, we started in the penthouse, which was only 200 square feet. So 2 of us were there. We hired.
The copier was in the bathroom, right?
Well, that is what had to happen. The office was so small that when we had visitors who came to the office, we'd have to roll the copier into the bathroom and pull the chair from the bathroom back out into the office so they could actually sit down.
That's crazy.
It wasn't long after I had joined Steve that we moved down a floor onto the 5th floor of the 245 building. It was yet another story to itself. We experienced ceilings that fell in the middle of the winter, and a fire in one of the light fixtures one day, and all sorts of interesting events. But that was before moving across the street.
Yeah, we bought one of the Bremer properties that was listed. You might remember, I think it was in the 90 or 91, when the trust marketed, I think, 13 or 14 or 15 of their downtown properties that had been held by the Bremer family for decades. And we bought the old Singer building. I think it was built in 1941. And we moved our practice across the street. We took a little spot in the upper floor. Eventually we filled up the upper floor, and then we kicked out a tenant and filled up the main floor. And then, eventually we rented space across the street. But the desire to stay downtown was always pretty strong. And I remember, I think on 2 occasions when we were thinking about our practice, obviously downtown had suffered when Kitsap Mall was built. And we thought, gosh, maybe we ought to go where everybody else is going. We ought to go out there and find some space in Silverdale. And the heck with downtown. And so we actually worked on that for a while. And we came like this close to renting space in Silverdale. And somebody had a right of first refusal on a space that we'd agreed to rent. And the day we were going to go out and sign the paper, we got this call, sorry, I can't lease it to you after all. And so that's when we started thinking about, 2 of those missteps into the middle of the county, and we started thinking, maybe our place is Bremerton. And then when the trust marketed those properties, we said, I think let's just stay downtown. Let's try and see if over the course of our career that we can thrive here and that we can help bring downtown back. And so the whole idea behind this practice was to invest in downtown, and not just with dollars and cents buying real estate, but trying to bring a professional staff here, have a presence downtown, help support local businesses, and maybe start doing significant projects in Bremerton that could help bring it back. I mean, that was like the career goal, was can we do some things downtown? And I think we really have, and certainly, this is one of them that's got a little bit of a special place in our hearts.
Right. But before we talk about this location, let's talk a little bit about the library on 5th Street. You had looked at purchasing the
That's right.
Martin Luther King Branch Library on 5th Street, cool Art Deco building.
Yeah.
What transponded during that time?
Well, I think the basic thing there was we were going to buy the library. The library operation was conceived to move up into this new Norm Dix Government Center, this new government center, as maybe a smaller high-tech kind of library. And that we would sort of orchestrate all of this, and it would be good for all parties. And what sort of didn't materialize in that was that it wasn't good for the library operation. They fell short in terms of money. And we thought to ourselves, do we really want to do this? I mean, it didn't seem fair to all concerned. So we just said, let's just back away from it. It's not right. It's not right in a certain way. And we were doing the test to fit on that building, and I think we discovered we could maybe get 28 or 30 people in there. And obviously it wouldn't have lasted us very many years, so it was really fortuitous that we didn't buy it. And of course, it's a great library, so I think it worked out for everybody.
It is a great building.
Who wouldn't love it?
Yeah, beautiful spot. So here we are in the former Sears Tire Auto Lube Center.
Yeah, that's right.
And those of us that have been in Bremerton for a while know that 5th Street, you could pull in, get your tires worked on, get a oil change, get full service there. So what?
Full service here now.
And now it's a full service architect firm. So Mike, tell us about when you first looked at this facility. What did you see?
Well, a couple of things. One is proximity to the ferry and proximity to, the kind of core of downtown. We sort of made a decision to stay, with the library kind of being on the outside of that area we were looking for, and the post office and maybe the old fire station kind of being, we looked at a lot of different buildings. Some ideas were to maybe move to Manette and others. But, you know, when we thought about where we really wanted to be, there was a lot of things starting to happen with Bremerton. We wanted to be part of downtown Bremerton. And the proximity to the ferry is important. It's important for me in my practice. And frankly, most of our engineering consultants and some of our clients commute on the ferry, and they can walk on and off because their offices are in downtown Seattle. So this sort of hit the sweet spot for us. And it was big enough. We think it'll hold us for, at least for our 3 careers, and hopefully beyond that. And it's got some really nice aspects to it. It was kind of a raw space, a concrete box that really was deteriorated, but the basic building structure was pretty well intact with the exception of the roof. So when you think about what you can do with a building, and we have very talented designers here, and what they could do with this building was sort of a blank canvas. And we had gone through a programming process earlier before we found a building, which kind of indicated what type of space and what type of building we should try and find for ourselves. And one of the aspects of that was some volume. And this building on this floor has a lot of vertical volume and horizontal volume. So that was, again, one of the driving pieces of why this building. So.
Dave, do you know the history of this building when Sears moved out? Do you have that feel?
The building was essentially vacant for 30 years since Sears moved out. They were the last tenant in the building, with the exception of a few rodents and pigeons, and it was pretty disgusting when we first bought it.
I think they moved out in the mid-'80s.
Right.
Is when they moved out.
Right. So when you first came in to look at this place, there were pigeons living in it, some water accumulated, but
Lots of pigeons and lots of water.
lots of pigeons and lots of water. Who said, this is it? This is what's going to work? Was there a process?
Yeah, there was a process. And we left that to Greg Belding, a principal here and our longtime, one of our longtime designers. We said, here are 3 or 4 places that we could probably buy or move. We were looking at some new space as well that had been erected in downtown Bremerton. And we took the basic program tenants and gave them to Greg and said, test these, fit these in these different buildings, and let's take a look when you're done and give us a recommendation. And this building was the clear winner. And I think for the reasons that Mike said, they were all downtown, but this one had the volume in 2 directions. And frankly, we were just really tired of being shoehorned in space where we had desk space, but we didn't have any common space, and we didn't have space to experiment or innovate. We wanted this kind of space that you're sitting in now that was really flexible, where we could have the community. And when we did the test to fit, this big old box really, it said, this will work. So that's how we made the decision.
Mike, tell us about what was the passion? What did you want as well as what everyone else wanted? But I understand you had a lot of wants.
Well,
In a good way.
Well, obviously, the first need or criteria was to find a place where we could live for probably 2 decades and more. So certainly outliving the 3 of us and in our partnership here. But more than that, we wanted a building that we could develop into almost a sustainable laboratory for the community. And we started out our process in design of this building not looking at lead or leadership in energy and environmental design aspects, but primarily what we could do that would be the most sustainable project and the most innovative project that we could do, that we could afford to do. Basically, as there are 6 of us, our wives and Steve and Dave and I, who own this building. And so, there are obviously the financial impacts to us as the owners as to what we could do. So that was kind of the second criteria. And I think third, I just wanted a place where I was energized, where I could come to work every day and the days go by fast. Yesterday I was amazed at, I looked at my watch and it was 5:30. This, daylight was coming into the building, people were still around, the air was fresh, and there's a liveliness about this building that builds energy, I think, as we're here, and it's pretty cool.
There was very definitely a pride factor too, I think, that is important to all of us. I think we've always had, plenty of confidence that we could tackle design problems and do a great job for people, and we've spent, the better part of a career doing that already, and the opportunity to do it, for ourselves in a way that showcases our abilities, but also practices in a really sustainable manner, has been a huge reward. I don't think, at least not on the horizon, people always ask, are you going to design your own house and this kind of thing? And frankly, I say, no, I probably won't. I like my old Craftsman house in Bremerton. Will you design a vacation cabin for yourself on the ocean? No, I probably won't. I don't want a vacation cabin on the ocean. But we got to do this. And I think this was sort of the career opportunity, to do something that reflected who we are, and to do it in a way that we're really proud of. And I think we've accomplished that.
There was, let's talk a little bit about the human energy. A staff of 30 plus, some on this side of the street, some on the opposite side of the street. Now you're all in one space. Talk a little bit about that, Dave.
We really, in a lot of ways, were three offices practicing together between the upstairs, downstairs, and across the street. We made do, and we did a lot of things to be social, to try to interact, but it still was just difficult. It was hard to overcome. And I agree with Mike. The energy level now is tremendous, and there are social atmospheres that are happening that could not happen before, and a lot of the office is set up for those social interactions. Easy to come down and have lunch with someone that you wouldn't have had lunch with before just because you just happened to drop in. Yeah, and that's been a wonderful change, which we expected, and it's going to be even better than expected in the end.
The staff's been, really accommodating, and they've been listening to this discussion about a new office for a long time, and some of them have been listening to it, since we started looking, and when Bozeman took office was about the time. So it's been a long conversation, and I think to their credit, they believed that, well, these guys say they're going to do this, and when we kind of when it all lined up with our ability to purchase something and horsepower that the firm had accumulated, we did it, and I think the staff really needs to be recognized that they kind of hung with us in all of this, and in the end they designed the building and really kind of made all this happen.
Yeah.
So.
Did pretty much every staff member get to the charrette term? A charrette is describe a charrette, and then was all the staff involved in those?
Well, charrette is a French term, and it comes out of the design world in probably the 1800s in France, where it's an intensive work session, and then actually you complete a project and put it on a cart, and that's the charrette. And what we use that for, and a lot of architectural firms use charrette processes, where it's an intensive work session where a lot of ideas are thrown out, and no idea is any better than any other idea. It's a way of brainstorming in an intensive way and coming up to the best solution. So I think staff were always invited to be a part of the design process. Obviously there were leaders in the design process, but staff had influence, and a lot of what you see is a result of the charrette process and this brainstorming. I mean, we've got a garage door in this building that's sitting right here, which came out of an idea related to theater. And the idea of a flywall, and
In the curtain behind us.
and the curtain behind us, right? So you don't come up with those sort of ideas sitting as one person at a desk drawing or dreaming. It comes out of a conversation, and that's what the charrette process is. So yeah, I would say pretty much every staff, not just design staff, but office staff, administrative staff, everybody, IT, all had a hand in the outcome of this building.
Well, I talked to one of the staff, Jamie Osterman, that I know very well, and she says sometimes it's hard to go home at night. I mean, you're so comfortable, and it's like, and you're busy, and you're refreshed and energized, and you look at your watch, and it's 5:30, and it's like, wow, either I better go home or just keep diving in.
Well, it's good because we're busy.
That's right. You are busy.
We are busy. Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting us, and we want to talk to those lead staff people, the design, interior design, and the folks that led you through this process, because it takes the leadership to say, here we go, here we go. Now, you're going to do this, and we want you to do this, and lead us through this, and
they've been
step
fantastic.
up. And we're
They've
going to
been
talk to some of those folks. So
Great.
thanks for joining us.
Thank you,
And
Char.
we'll
You're
be
very
right back.
welcome.
We're going to talk to some other folks. Stay with us.
We wanted a real sense of welcome and arrival in the new building. We like procession, and in this case, we have a couple really wonderful things that are going on here. Obviously, there's a timeline of our firm's history. It's 30 feet long, and
Cool.
and we can manipulate
so
it,
young.
in the future. Right, this tells the story of the firm's beginnings and then its growth over the years, and Mike and Dave's coming here, joining me in partnership, and some of our more recognizable buildings, projects that we've worked on over the years. Other significant events in the firm's history.
Welcome back. Joining me now are Greg Belding and Sean Dinkun with Rice Fergus Miller Architects. Greg is Greg, what is your role here at Rice Fergus Miller?
I'm a principal in the firm, and I've been with the firm since 1990. So I think that puts me as the longest standing employee here. Also puts me as the first.
Oh, really? You were the first one hired, so you survived the 245 4th Street building?
Yes, I did. We've come a long ways, as you mentioned earlier. Back in the old days, Steve and I sat in a 250 square foot penthouse with a copy machine in the bathroom.
We've heard that one. We did hear that one. Sean, how long have you been with the firm, and what is your role?
I'm a project coordinator and a senior associate at the firm, and I've been here for the last 9 years.
So these two folks were really instrumental in this building, and I think we're going to start with Greg, because Greg did the test to fit process. Tell us about that, Greg.
Well, before we even set out to find a building, we spent a period of time figuring out what we needed in a building. And that was not an exercise that I led, but something that I was certainly involved in, was trying to figure out how much space do we need? What kinds of things do we need to do in our space? How big do we think we're going to be? What kinds of things do we want to do in a new space that we can't do in our current space? And really trying to figure out what that was. And so that was a process that was led by Jeremy, who I think you're going to talk to in a little bit. And out of that, we really came to know what it was that we needed. We knew that there were a number of options that were out there for us in terms of where we could then move. Some of those spaces were in buildings in and around downtown. One building that doesn't even exist yet and may never, but one that we looked at. And the first thing that I did was take that, what we call a building program, which is that document that says this is how much space we need and this is what it needs to do, was to take that document and physically apply it to these buildings that we were looking at. And we looked at a number of different buildings. Some of them were multi-story buildings. Some of them were just taking up one floor. There were a lot of opportunities in spaces that obviously had the amount of space that we needed, and we fit in all of them. But there were two things that we then applied to those test to fit exercises that made this building stand out. One of those was what we call the big idea, and that came out of the programming exercise. And Steve may have talked to you already about this idea of a black box theater. So that was a big idea that came out of the programming exercise. And then we also have a mission statement. And a big part of our mission statement, in fact, I think the last phrase in that is to encourage experimentation, sustainability, and innovation. And the other spaces didn't offer that. They would offer us generic space that we could do an office in. And what this offered was this huge volume and this opportunity to build this idea of a forum, which really existed in all of the other spaces, but mostly it was a room with an 8-foot ceiling and big enough to hold a group of us. But this one was big enough to innovate in. It was big enough to experiment in. And then the building itself, unlike the other buildings, I think, really offered an opportunity to be sustainable. The other buildings had existing mechanical systems in them. They were buildings that we could just move into and plug in and go. This was a building that was certainly going to be torn down by anybody else, so it was an opportunity to save that. Its construction type and its shape lend itself really well to insulating, super insulating, and to being energy efficient. It had no mechanical system, so we had to start from scratch and put something in. It just offered a lot of stuff the other buildings didn't offer at every level. And the space that we're in now, this forum space, I think is really key on those other two pieces about experimentation and innovation.
Yeah, wow. Excellent. And what a space this is. Now, Sean, you were project coordinator and instrumental in the lead process as far as paperwork goes and keeping the firm on task. First of all, tell us what LEED means.
LEED stands for Leadership in Energy Efficient Design.
Leadership in Energy Efficient Design. And what does all of that entail?
It's a lot. It's and it's growing every year, but
And is it mandatory?
no, it's an elective that owners choose to have their buildings recognized by the USGBC as leaders in energy efficient design. A goal that you establish in the beginning so that you understand what your parameters are of what you can use in your building and how it will be used ultimately.
Let's talk about energy design. Is it electricity? Is it water? Is it heating? Is it all that? Tell us.
Everything. Jeremy is probably the best person to tell you about what our building is doing, and Greg can probably fill you in on some of the details. My role was very much keeping track of how this project was complying with the guidelines set out by the USGBC and making sure that that we were getting all that we could points-wise with them and all that we could for our own goals.
What is the USGBC?
United States Green Building
Council.
Green Building Council.
Great. So they're the ones that you supply information to, and they say, wow, you're right on track. Wow, this could be really something that we really want to check it out. We want to come and see. Do you anticipate those folks or folks from around the country, region, coming to look at this building?
We sure would like it to happen. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like magazines and all kinds of good things.
That was one of our goals early on. Once we picked the building and began starting the design process, the very first step we took was holding what we call an eco charrette, and that was a process where we had the leadership in the firm get together and talk about what our sustainability goals were, and they were pretty high level to start with. So coming out of that, we weren't talking about whether or not we were going to have what kind of heating and cooling system we were going to have. We just knew that we wanted it to be net zero, for instance. So that was a goal of ours, was to say we want a building that at least can be a building that doesn't need to draw electricity from the grid. And so we designed, so that was a goal coming out of the charrette. Once we started the design process, we then had the mechanical engineer working with our electrical engineer and an energy model to figure out how much energy the building was going to use, how much energy we could generate if we covered the roof with solar panels, and design a system that would fit into that model. So we sort of worked backwards in that sense. So that was a goal that came out of our eco charrette. Another goal was to use local craftsmen and artisans. And so we hired a local contractor, and we hired a contractor who didn't have LEED experience. And that was important because we wanted to make this a process that more people in the region know how to do.
Excellent, excellent. Good for that construction person as well as for your firm.
Absolutely. And it helped, it's part of building community, which is important to us as well. We wanted to save water. So a lot of people think that water is tomorrow's energy issue, So in 50 years, we'll be having water crises and maybe not energy crises, or maybe we'll have them both. But saving water was important, so we had a goal of reducing our water usage by 50%. So that was another high-level goal that became something that had to be implemented in the design process. And then once we registered for LEED, in steps Sean, because she's the one who has to keep track of what we're doing and how we're documenting that we're actually getting that stuff done.
Great. Did they monitor you along the way, the ASBGC?
USGBC. There's 2 points during the project where you submit a list of items that we think we have complied with and therefore are asking their review. At the end of design, they take a look at the project as a whole and make sure that we're on task to be able to implement the kinds of things that are required at each point. And then again at the end of construction to make sure that we actually followed through on the things that we said we were going to do. It's a way to validate those things, those design ideas at the end of the project, make sure that it really happened. And you hit on an interesting point that LEED is also, it's not just about energy that your building is using or requiring to run. It's also about the energy that we're using as communities and being able to share the opportunity, the educational opportunity with our project benefits our community in a bigger way, and that's another small piece of what LEED is about as well.
Excellent.
Yeah. One of the well, there are basically 3 criteria that the U.S. Green Building Council uses to measure whether or not something is sustainable. So it has to be. You may have heard the term triple bottom line. It means that it's not sustainable if it's not environmentally friendly, if it's not economically beneficial, and if it doesn't support basically a social benefit. And you can quantify that in any number of ways, but you can sort of think of that as supporting your community, doing projects that have an overall economic bottom line. So in our case, by being super energy efficient, we spent a little more money when we built the building. Not a lot, a little bit. And the kinds of money savings that come out of that are huge. And I don't know if Steve talked with you about that earlier, but I mean, we're talking about 5 figures a year in energy savings. It's huge. So, and of course, that is also environmentally friendly. So there's this triple bottom line that is a requirement for everything in LEED.
Great. Well, thanks for your time today. We're going to talk to Jeremy and Jennifer next and get their thoughts and topics on the lead that they took. Not the LEED, but the LEAD as lead project design and lead interior design. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
So you're probably wondering about this thing.
I just love it.
It's I think it's 14 feet in diameter, and it's getting a lot of attention. People who come to the building look up and they say, wow, you know, that's a big fan. And it is. It's probably the biggest fan outside the shipyard in Bremerton. It's actually made by a company called the Big Ass Fan Company. And so it's affectionately known as the Big Ass Fan.
Welcome back, and with us now are Jeremy Sutherland and Jennifer Frost. Jeremy is the lead project designer, and Jennifer is the lead interior designer. Welcome. So, Jeremy, first tell us about how long have you been with Rice Fergus Miller, and a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, I've been with Rice Fergus Miller for a little over 6 years now. And been working on this project for a very large portion of that.
Nice.
No, I work with primarily with our senior housing group, and my background has been both in healthcare and senior housing, also specializing in visualization, renderings, graphics, that sort of thing.
Ooh, that's exciting. How about you, Jen?
I've been here for almost 5 years. Came straight here from Washington State University, so go Cougs. I also work on senior housing. I do healthcare and hospitality as well, and I've been working on some aspect of the office for the last 5 years as well. So,
You are an interior designer. Yes. Mm-hmm. And Jeremy, are you an architect?
I am a designer.
A designer. So these are the two people that led the team of Rice Fergus Miller in this project. So let's, first of all, Jeremy, tell us about the whole design of this building and what was the most important to the team.
Oh wow, this goes back to 2006, and was asked by the partners to put together a programming exercise to where we were looking at what sort of spaces that we needed for the building and then how they might interact. And it really guided our search for what type of a building we were looking for. And it was part of that presentation, or part of that exercise, that the whole black box came out as being a way for us to sort of understand the way we worked, and also to understand our sort of relationship with the outside world. Internal projection and external projection are sometimes two different things, and the black box, specifically that it was formality shifting, it was experimental, it was flexible and adaptable, it was a teaching space, it was a working space. So we knew that we were going to have this really flexible workspace from the beginning, and then we started looking for buildings. And did a whole bunch of test to fit exercises, and this was really the only building that really allowed us to do what we wanted to do here.
Talk to us a little bit about this common space, and Jennifer, you can jump in as you can as well. This common space here, forum, I believe you folks call it, what was the driver here? And it was the education and the public, and talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mentioned that we were looking at this sort of internal face and the external face. This is really the place where internal meets external. It is that flexible space. It would be the actual theater of the black box theater. So you can see the wall that moves up and down and can divide the space into different areas. We have a lot of different lighting conditions. We have the theater curtain that can shift the formality of the space. We want it to be a place that people can sit out and eat their lunch. We want it to be a place for impromptu meetings. We want it to be a place that we can have an after-hours party. We want it to be a place that, what are all the test-to-fit exercises we went through here?
All the different scenarios, we'd sit in design meetings and Steve would say, well, what about this? And what about this? And this space, as we can do anything with this space, with movable furniture and all the different pieces and spaces that open up onto this. This is something that we didn't have in our old buildings.
The community space, meaning the community of RFM architects, as well as the Kitsap community, Bremerton community.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see just in not even a week we've been in the building, barely, and how, if we weren't down here filming, everyone would be eating lunch down here. And that was one of the biggest surprises, because a lot of people eat at their desk, or they have been in our old office, because we didn't have anywhere to eat. But the last just week, the 5 days we've been in this building, everyone's down here at these tables and eating and hanging out with other people that they don't work with all day long. So it's really great to see that staff are using the building the way that the design team intended for it to be used, so.
Jennifer, talk to us about this beautiful curtain behind you and the choice of color and texture, and it just adds such a dramatic piece to this space.
When we design, we always have this concept. So for us, it was the black box theater. When you think about theater, you have props. Props bring in your color, they bring in textures and a different mood to the space, a different feeling. So when you look around the building, you see that what's old is old and what's new is new. We didn't try to use new things and make them look old. And then when we brought color in, it was very strategic. And so in the furniture, there's color, and in the artwork and the super graphics we have on some of the walls. But the curtain was the big expression that we knew, that nod to theater, but also how it just changes the whole feeling of this space. In the evening when it's dimmer in here and the lights really, the texture of the curtain, the color, it's just really powerful. So.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. How about these tables that we see throughout? Steve told us that it was old wood from the building that some local folks worked on.
These were actually a couple of local contractors who do a lot of custom casework and a lot of residential sort of really custom stuff. I know them from mutual friends, and they actually took this wood looks great. You should have seen it before. It was really nasty. But they planed it down, laminated all the pieces together, and just the texture of the old nail holes that had been hanging.
And they're on casters, so they can totally move. They can be put together. There's some upstairs. There's 3 here. Just very, very cool. Very cool. Let's talk about water. Let's talk about how this building uses water, stores water, reuses water.
Sure. We have 2 3,000-gallon rain cisterns in the garage, which is below us. We're capturing rainwater from about 85% of the roof. It's all the areas of the roof that are not planted with green roof. We're using that water to flush all the toilets. We also have incredibly water efficient fixtures. We have dual flush toilets, pint flow urinals, low flow shower heads in our employee lockers and showers. We're essentially able to supply about 93% of our toilet flushing needs over the course of the year with harvested rainwater, so it's pretty exciting.
That's excellent. And we looked at this giant fan upstairs. Wow, absolutely cool. Jennifer, talk to us about the use of the old and keeping it old. Keeping it looking old, that it wasn't redone. Yeah, not making it look, oh, that's new, but it's old.
Again, there's an overarching how we design at Rice Fergus Miller, and every building that we design or space we design has a story. And so the story is told through the old elements in this building, through the beams and through us salvaging the roof material that we could, or building tables out of the other things that we had. To really honor what was here. For someone like me that's not from this area, I didn't know the history of Bremerton until this project, and what this building was. And so there's a lot of other people that are clients or future employees that don't know the story of Bremerton or this building. And so to be able to walk someone through and really honor what was here is why we kept it raw in its original state.
Right. Whose idea was the door fly?
that would be me. What's funny is this is one of what was originally planned to be 5 or 6.
We were going to have walls and ceilings and all
Cool.
But when you start working through the technicalities of actually getting them done, this one was the most essential. It allows us to break the forum into 2 completely separate spaces. It allows the materials library to have a much more closed-in feel for more of a formal presentation in here, that sort of thing. And it's just cool. Who else has movable walls?
No kidding. And Steve was telling us you can raise it up and put a display on it or a presentation. That's fair.
To it. And this was an element that we had in our old office, obviously in a different version, but having the library in a public space where people pass through. But when we start bringing clients back into the building, this will be a space that we have meetings. And so it was really important to have something that we could close in this space for some of our clients that do require a little bit more privacy and just that closed-in feeling. It totally changes the scale of this space. So.
Do you enjoy coming to work here?
Absolutely.
How could you not?
This was a tough project. I mean, to be honest, it wasn't an easy project. I've learned a lot on it. There was a lot of challenges, but it's so exciting. It's so rewarding to come into this space and hear the feedback, not just from people that work here, but the reps that are coming back in and restocking our shelves, or clients coming into the building. And I do our university recruiting, so I'm really excited to start bringing students into the building so that they can see it. So it's not just a retention piece for employees, it's a recruiting tool. There's so many different things, so it's really exciting.
Right. Now people want to come and work in Bremerton and work in this cool building. Very, very cool. How about electricity use? Jeremy, can you talk to us about that? Energy efficiency?
I can. We took an interesting approach. I'm not sure how much Steve told you, but our mechanical system in the building relies on a holistic approach to the building. We super insulated the exterior skin, and what that allows us to do is to minimize the temperature swings that we get inside the building.
Right.
Fundamental mindset, again, from the beginning, we never designed the building and said, how can we make it more efficient? We set out by saying, we want to be net zero. So if we were to cover every horizontal surface of this building with solar panels, how much energy could we generate on site? And we designed the building to that. So before we ever thought about thermal comfort or anything like that, we put a cap on ourselves. Now, we haven't covered every horizontal surface with solar panels, but we could, and we could be net zero. With that said, it just set kind of a fundamental precedent that it was a mindset shift that we went into, so it was never quite an option. So the mechanical system has sort of a dead zone that between 60 degrees and 75 degrees outside temperature, we're not using any heating or any energy to heat or cool the space. And we rely on natural ventilation, which is huge. We are, well, in terms of energy performance, we're about 43% more efficient than the most efficient building in Seattle right now. Soon to be outdone, but these things always, that's the great thing about sustainability.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a trend that's moving forward. But we are, so it's been a really incredible sort of holistic approach to building, relying as much on the energy model as we did the architectural models for the design work on the project.
Congratulations, and wow, what a beautiful piece for our downtown redevelopment and our renovation and rejuvenation of our community, and how cool to show our community we're not just building new, we're taking older buildings and making them reusable. And that's just really fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for joining us, and congratulations on this great project. Thanks a lot.